Welcome to Life in Sirens, Behind and on the Scene, a podcast by first responders. We're your hosts, Sophie,
Jamie,
and Aubrey.
The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policies or positions of any medical institutions, emergency medical services, or healthcare organizations. Patient privacy is a top priority, and all discussions involving real-world emergency situations are de-identified and altered to ensure confidentiality. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional or your local EMS protocols before making any decisions regarding patient care or medical practices. Listener discretion is advised, as some topics may include discussions of real-world emergency situations.
Welcome to Life in Sirens podcast, episode 4. This is our Fireside chat style episode. We will be, if you are with us on TikTok, we are live streaming this. So let's get into it.
So kicking off this episode, we decided to talk about moral injury in terms of things that you have to do at work. So I want to just read a quick definition of moral injury so that we're all kind of on the same page. So it's when someone feels like they violated their conscience or moral compass, when they take part in, witness, or fail to prevent an act that disobeys their own moral values or personal principles. So in perfect Soph fashion, I'm going to kick this off myself because I don't want to put you guys on the spot. One time, like times in our career that I feel like I experience moral injury is times that we respond to behaviorals where people have self-harmed but have no intention of suicide. So when they use inflicting pain on themselves as a coping mechanism, but they're not suicidal. In a lot of systems, they don't have it set up in a way that you can have them talk to their resources, have them tell you if they have a plan or not to like mitigate this behavior. Most places just look at it really black and white. Like this is clearly self-mutilating behavior, which means that you have to be transported. I have a really hard time with that because I just don't feel like the ER is the best place for a 14-year-old girl that felt like she had no other options, so she cut herself. I just have such a hard time being like, I'm going to take you to this adult ER where you will receive probably not a lot of good resources. It's not a good place for you, but I have to because that's what our system says we have to do.
Right. Like, is that truly the safest place? Is that the safest next move?
Right. And is that a move that's going to make them feel safe? And I almost always feel like the answer is no. And so to look at them, the moral injury for me happens when I have to look at them and say, I know that this is not the best thing for you, but this is what we have to do. So let's just get through it together. And that is just brutal.
Especially because you know that the secondary injury that can cause for that patient, let's say that they find themselves in a situation down the road where they are having SI, are they going to be likely to reach out for help then? Because they already know the road that's going to take them down. Probably not.
Right. And there's a moment where you just have to do that because their physical safety is what's most important. But there are so many more in-between moments where there's way more appropriate resources. And I just have such a hard time looking them in their eyes and being like, this will help.
Because it probably won't.
Because it probably won't.
I think that perfectly illustrates how messed up our mental health system is, how our emergency medicine system is, because the ER really is no help. It's just a place to isolate you and keep you from unaliving yourself.
Yeah, from physical harm.
Correct.
And the ER, like the poor ERs too, they're not set up. It's not their fault. They're also not set up well for mental health care.
Right.
It's kind of become like the dumping ground for anyone that is unruly or that you don't know what to do with between PD.
Absolutely.
And everybody. So
it's like we don't know what to do next, so I guess we'll
go to the ER.
Go there.
Right. But that's the moment that I experienced the most moral injury, where I have the most trouble on shift, really kind of justifying the position that I'm in. in that position of power that just feels icky at that point.
Yeah.
What obs do you have a moral injury that really just like, it just does not feel right to you?
Actually, I wanted to say a little something more about that.
Yeah.
I think that, like you said, we do have a big mental health problem in dealing with mental health, like as far as having appropriate resources. But I think another thing that I feel like is very morally compromising on the EMS side is that there are places that you can walk into that are not ERs to be able to seek mental health, and that is like their whole specific purpose. But then they still call 911 to be transported to the emergency room. And to me, that just makes no sense. Like, why do we have complete separate entities that this is their whole job, but yet you still have to go through this loophole? And I get like the whole medical clearance and all of that to an extent.
Absolutely. Like, why do we not have a system set up where you can be a behavioral health clinic, but you can also medically clear your patients if they do not have, like, if someone clearly goes and is complaining of chest pain, that's a different situation. But if someone just needs to be like run-of-the-mill medically cleared so they can be a resident in your facility, why are there not steps within that system to bypass the ER?
Correct.
Well, we have plenty in our region that are standalone behavioral health hospitals. I would love to know what's preventing, like, and maybe this is different in other states.
Very true.
I'm hoping it is. Why, as emergency medical services, are we not allowed to transport
to those places?
Correct.
Why are we
Yeah.
not allowed? It's a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Can there not be an emergency room at, like, if your only complaint is this, and why cannot labs be drawn? Why can we not do these things at
Right.
that facility?
Why do we not have a behavioral health emergency department?
Correct.
That would be
Because
very cool.
just like there's a chest pain center, it is not appropriate for me to take this behavioral health patient to this facility because they are not specializing in this.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to help them. In fact, it's going to, like, our whole job as EMS, it's one of the points on our Star of Life is definitive care. I am not taking this patient to definitive care, not even close.
No.
In fact, where we transport most frequently, it could be several days, even a week, before they get to definitive care, and that is absolutely mind-blowing and borderline disgusting to
And
me.
how wild is it that if I'm like, okay, you fell off a 10-foot fall greater than 10 feet. You have a broken arm and a questionably broken leg. I am going to look at that. I'm going to say, high mechanism, 2 problems. We're going to a trauma center. Awesome. We have one in our region. Like, great. It's close. We're going to go there. Why can I not do that for a behavioral health emergency? Somebody calls for depression. I'm like, awesome. There's a facility right here that can handle that really well. But somebody calls for extensive self-harm with SI. Like, that's a level 1.
Exactly. Why
And so
are
I'm
we
going to
so
take
behind?
you to the behavioral health level 1. I just feel like we are so okay with physical injuries, with being like, oh, this is big bad. But we're so not okay with your brain and being like, oh, this is big bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we're so okay with saying, we're in a mental health crisis. We have a mental health crisis. We have so many mental health patients. We don't know what to do with all of them. We don't know what to do with all of them because we haven't created a method to managing and taking care of these patients.
And EMS is such a small part of the system, but like the frustration that comes with going to the same facilities to transport these people to get a medical clearance that they realistically don't need, and to wait for 5, 6, 7 days to get placed in the right facility. Like, when you do this on repeat and you see the same people call because the system's not working, it just is so
It's
debilitating.
devastating.
Yeah, it really is.
For me, it's not like a requirement, but a place where I've experienced moral injury and I maybe could have prevented the moral injury is maybe working with someone who I honestly didn't have the courage to stand up to and prevent something from happening that could have protected the patient emotionally or physically.
Like being a witness to inappropriate care.
Yes, being a witness to inappropriate behavior or care. And that is so hard, especially when the provider is senior to you. Even when you know better. Because what do? They're senior to you. They might even have a higher license level than you. They might be, even though you're a paramedic, they might be a critical care paramedic. Mm-hmm. Even though you're just, your standard paramedic, they might be an FTO. And then what are you left with? Obviously, there's still an obligation, and then when it comes down to it, if you were to go to court or to the state, they would say, well, why didn't you do anything? And I have to live with a lot of that, and I think about a lot of those scenarios often. Why didn't you have the courage to stand up to that?
Absolutely.
And that's terrifying.
And those scenarios and situations, they don't think about the social implications of those things, like the social pressure to follow your hierarchy in your service is really difficult to get around sometimes. And even though I know I should speak up, I know that what they're doing is not right. And there's a difference between this is immediately going to harm somebody, or I just feel like your behavior is inappropriate.
It's not so nice.
Things like that. It's really hard to say, like, hey, you need to sit this one out.
It's taken me many, many years to get to that point, and I finally have, and actually very recently have been able to stand up to other providers on the scene. Even like the EMT firefighter that's their captain. That took a lot for me to be able to do, to be like, I need you to stop talking because you're being wildly disrespectful to my patient. I need you to be patient, and if you're not going to be patient, I need you to leave the scene. That has happened to me, and they still gave me a hard time after.
This is a bit off topic, but have y'all ever found yourselves in a position where you are apologizing for correcting bad behavior just in order to smooth things over so that you can continue to go to work, like, synergistically?
Absolutely. And it's typically with other agencies or other crews. Like, it's not your truck. I can handle that. Or your crews. It's definitely, I don't know. We work at a service where it's interagency complications just because we don't always work with the same hierarchy, or like, it's just 2 people on a truck for us. That's a lot easier to work through things than it is with 5 people on a truck.
Absolutely. And we have a lot of licensure differences, and so we'll experience like their highest rank on a scene, like if it's fire, their highest rank on a scene might be their captain, but is an EMT. And so I am 2 licensure levels above them. So if this is a medical call, that means that it's my scene. But if it's a, let's say it's an MVA, well then technically I have command over the patient, but they have command over the scene, which is a difficult thing to navigate.
That's complicated.
If you're in a situation with PD, where they've got a sergeant or a lieutenant on scene that has no medical licensure, but they are the highest rank for them. I've been in a situation where I had to pull a sergeant off of my patient because his behavior was mounting to a physicality that I was no longer comfortable with.
You want to talk about a moral dilemma.
Yeah.
And how do you put your hand not only on a police officer, but on a sergeant? And I'm lucky enough that there were other officers on that scene that know my moral character and that what I was doing was truly what I thought was right.
I think that's one of the scariest situations I've yet to be in, where it's just like, you just are so helpless, but like, what do you do?
What do you do? It was a moment that I was like really scared. But that was kind of the moment for me where I realized, kind of like with what you said, preventing moral injury sometimes is really difficult to make that choice.
Scary.
What'd you think of? Did you come up with one?
Good.
I have one for you, but I don't know if we can talk about it. If you've ever looked at her TikTok, it's called Hippie Paramedic, which is very telling. She's laid back, just kind, a sweet, good person.
If you can't tell.
If you can't tell. Oh. And really understands that like sometimes people make decisions in life that they did not necessarily foresee the outcome, and now we're here, which means that we have to do something about it because somebody called on them. But it is going to be a terrifying situation for them, and it's every time that we ever have to force a patient to the ER that has done psychedelics.
Oh, that is such a good one, actually. Yeah, you're absolutely right. My heart hurts every time. But, like, they're not alert and oriented, so you have to, but it does hurt my soul.
Yeah, it's
every
rough.
time.
Every time that they
There's so
are
much
on a
gray
bad
area.
trip, and you know that, like, if their friend just wouldn't have called, they would have been home, and it would wear off, and they would stay safe. But now that we're there, we so clearly cannot leave them.
Yeah. You are backed into a corner at that point, but yes.
Yeah. I feel like
You're
for
right.
you, that is the system. Like, you have to do it, but it hurts your soul so bad.
It does. That and forcing anybody over the age of 80 to do literally anything.
Oh, yeah.
It
Honestly.
literally hurts me so bad.
Do you remember
So
that
bad.
one time with Austin? That's all I'm going to say.
Yes. Yes, I do.
That's all I can say, really. We'll convene after this.
Yeah.
It is so specific that
Yeah,
there's just
It
no
really
way.
is. But that poor man, he has gotten beat up by more meemaws and peepaws.
Oh, really, though? I
Austin,
know.
Yeah, because
really has.
he also has that where it's like forcing a granny or a papaw to do anything that they don't want to. Is
I mean,
just
they've
like,
lived their life.
That's what I'm
They
saying.
have.
I feel
Heart-wrenching.
like they've really put in the time that I have no right to be telling you what to
Yes,
do.
that's what. Sir, yes, sir. I think it's hard enough in this career to wrap things up that to avoid any kind of moral dilemmas and injury as it is. So I think policy reform is a big deal, and I think that hiding behind, I think we dump people at the ER often because we have to protect ourselves from liability in the form of policy, and that is something that needs to change in the form
Absolutely.
of protocols and medical direction. There you have it. That is the conclusion for our Fireside Chat for episode number 4. Thank you for listening. And if you feel so inclined, visit us on our additional socials: YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Apple Podcasts.
This has been Life in Sirens, produced by 3 nerds trying to bring you content that you might actually care about.